Hey guys, welcome back to Dr. Z, A World Never Mentioned. And we have our next interview episode, and this time on South Asia. So, all the way from Florida, we have Mr. Sanjay Upadhya. Sanjay Upadhya is a Nepali journalist, author, and analyst. His latest book, Backfire in Nepal: How India Lost the Plot to China, is scheduled for release in early 2021. Upadhya has worked for the British Broadcasting Corporation, the Times of London, Interpress Service, Khaleej Times, and the United Nations. His previous books include Nepal and the Geostrategic Rivalry between China and India, and The Raj Lives, India and Nepal. So I am super excited to interview a person who is very well versed with the cultures and geopolitical occurrences in this region. And I hope you guys are too. So introducing Mr. Sanjay Upadhya. So hey Sanjay, how are you doing?
I'm great. Zian, how are you?
I'm doing well. So far I've been enjoying my winter break from online school, so it's been pretty peaceful, and I'm getting prepared for the new year as well. Hopefully things will get back to normal very soon.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's been a terrible year for
Yeah,
all of us.
pretty rough, yeah. So are you ready to get started, Sanjay?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's get to it. So, my first question to you, what exactly is your book about?
Well, this new one that's coming up early next year is called Backfire in Nepal: How India Lost the Plot to China.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the theme is it's a little strange that India has been the driving force of any democratic
Very
political
sure, yeah.
change. And this time, China somehow out of the blue came out to, you know, with a preponderant position that has left everybody surprised right now.
Mm-hmm.
Even to this day, as we are speaking, I mean, we have Chinese delegations in Nepal trying to um, influence the con- ruling party to reverse the party split and etc. We don't know what's it's happening exactly right now, but it's just like amazing that people
Yeah.
wouldn't have expected since Nepal became a republic in 2008.
Yeah, I absolutely love it, Sanjay, and I'll definitely be checking it out too. And hopefully listeners will as well. Remember, the scheduled release is early next year in 2021. But one follow up question to that, as we talk about how Nepal is kind of sandwiched between two global superpowers, would you say that the culture in Nepal, even though it has its own kind of cultural developments, is more similar to India or to China after all these political influences?
Predominantly India. There are certain Chinese influences, especially
Hmm.
along the northern belt with Tibet.
Makes sense, yeah.
But yeah, but it's mostly India because the border with India is totally open,
Hmm.
unregulated, and geographically very accessible.
Makes
Whereas
sense, yeah.
the Chinese border is more mountainous,
Yeah, with the
very
Himalayas and everything.
yes, forbidding. So it is very, very Indian oriented. Uh, it's in terms of food, in terms of movies, in terms of
Yep.
entertainment, everything. So it's more predominantly Indian.
Yeah, that would make sense too because of, like mainly Hinduism being a religion and the languages are pretty similar. So I understand what you're talking about from there. So our next question here is tell me a little bit about where you're from and what kind of lifestyle did you have growing up?
Well, I was born in Nepal, in Kathmandu, the capital, but at a very early age, I came to the United States in New York City. I lived there for 4 years, where my father was a Nepalese diplomat posted to the UN.
Mhm.
And then growing up, I moved to Bangkok um, as part of the same my dad's work.
Mhm.
And from the early 70s, I've been back in Nepal. I was back in Nepal. But the interesting thing is, I soon moved to a region that was bordering India. So it was more like right on the Indian border.
Got it.
And
Mhm.
yeah, given that the border was open, and it's funny because I can tell you a story. I used to go to India every day to read my newspaper.
Oh, really? So you're like
Yeah,
that close to India?
that close. I just
Oh,
crossed the
wow.
border. go to the newsstand where this gentleman was kind enough to let this student, read his the Times of India for free,
Oh,
and that
okay.
was every day. And so I used to go to India every day, and I can tell you from another vantage point, my dad's birthplace when we used to go there, it's right on the border.
Hmm.
And when we travel there, there's no way of knowing like whether you're on Nepalese territory or Indian territory because the village road kind of zigzags between India and Nepal.
Oh, wow.
That nobody has a clue now where you are at that particular moment. No, nothing. There's no border markers, so it was pretty interesting, that way.
Yeah, I never realized it was that open of a border, and I guess with how similar the cultures are, I mean, that's a really interesting, unique standpoint you bring up there.
It is because, and even to this day, of course, things have changed a bit, crime, smuggling, and
Hmm.
security, these things, but still, it is a largely open, unregulated border. We don't need passports, uh, we just have IDs, and then if they need it, visa free, no visas. So it's
Oh,
pretty,
so it's still like that, even in today's
oh, it
world
is
with
still like that,
security and
except,
everything.
yeah, it's not restricted in your traditional sense at all.
Yeah, I got it. And bringing that up, I mean, you got a great exposure, mix of exposure from being able to be raised in your numerous different lifestyles and also being connected to your own roots in Nepal as well. So it looks like you've done quite a bit of traveling. I mean, being able to go to Bangkok is definitely a different, completely different culture than being in South Asia. So that must have been very, very cool.
Yes, it was because it was in the early days. Bangkok was just opening up, and there was a large Indian community there.
Oh, is that
Uh,
so?
oh yeah, I mean, we used to go watch Hindi movies, and then even then, I mean, I'm talking about the late 1960s. Of course, Bangkok has changed tremendously,
I'm sure it has, yeah.
but it was more like your community there, and there were fewer Nepalis, of course, but then the first thing we would strike up a friendship with was Indians, basically, because of a
Hmm.
common culture.
Yeah, and now that we've talked about like where you've traveled, I mean, where all in South Asia have you actually traveled to besides from of course India? And how were your experiences over there?
Well, India, I've stayed there a lot. I've lived there a lot. But the other countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, very just as a transit person, I don't have too much time spent there. But what I did was I was working in Dubai for about 3 years in 1997 to 2000,
Hmm.
where at the newspaper where I worked, it was virtual South Asia. I mean, you had Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis,
Oh
Sri
yeah,
Lanka.
and I can definitely attest to that because my mom was raised in Dubai at that time, so there was definitely a large South Asian population over there.
I mean, it was like, so even at work, it was more or less, you were involved with South Asia there. I mean, everything from cricket matches
Yeah.
I mean, the good side, the bad side, but still, I mean, it was very interesting to see these, the commonalities, these very, very strong links that even go above, the political differences. It was just amazing. Like I can tell you a story. I mean, I would basically be speaking Hindi. I mean, the Nepali variant of it, how a
Yeah.
regular Nepali would speak, and Pakistanis would come and congratulate me on my marvelous Urdu, and I say, you know,
Oh,
I'm speaking Hindi, and
yeah.
basically everybody would understand it. We just have with the basic Sanskrit root, Bengali, we would understand that, and even South Asians, like I would say, we had a lot of South Asian, South Indian staff members, a large South Indian population there. But I could even make out much of the conversation just by the root Sanskrit words, you know,
Yeah.
what they were talking about. So, it was pretty interesting. I mean, it was basically, South Asia alive there, babe.
Oh my, yeah. And I mean, with Urdu and Hindi, they're all very, very similar to one another. I guess I think the only difference between the two languages is that like Urdu has a little bit more of Arabic roots, and Hindi and Nepali, I guess, have more Sanskrit roots, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, but for Nepalis, there was a bit of an advantage for me in the sense that Nepali has this Arabic and Farsi root, which probably makes us a little bit closer to uh, uh, Urdu. But again, the way I have to read Urdu is through the Devanagari script, through the Hindi script. I don't read the Urdu, traditional Urdu script that's like
Yeah,
Arabic.
it's like somewhat more similar to like Arabic kind of script.
Yeah. So what I
Hmm.
do is we have that Urdu written in the Hindi script. So with all those particular grammar forms and everything else. So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is. And we'll get right back to the languages because I do have another question about languages coming up for you. But when you talked about Bhutan, it was really interesting because I never got a chance to cover Bhutan in my previous episode. But when you traveled there, was there something that really struck out to you?
Well, I mean, Bhutan would be, let's say, it was a mixture of ethnic Nepalis and ethnic Bhutanese at
Oh,
that
okay.
time. So what would happen was, half the population was at that time, you know, they spoke Nepali. They had Nepali surnames, they had Nepali names. Of course, the dialect would be a little different. We'd have to try to, pay attention to the nuances, but it was basically an extension of our like travels in eastern Nepal, where you cross the border into India, and then you have Sikkim, and then Bhutan. So it and Darjeeling. These all parts of India, and Bhutan is an independent country, of course. You don't feel that different there because the language is there, and even the ethnic Bhutanese would understand Nepali, whereas we wouldn't understand their language, the official Bhutanese language. But it was amazing there.
Yeah, and actually, something I recall is that what's really interesting about Bhutan is that they actually have a way of measuring their well-being known as like the gross national happiness, and also claiming the spot for being one of the happiest countries in the world. So I found that extremely fascinating.
Yeah, that was a very early precursor to this whole concept of human development as development. How development impacts the person as a whole. So their gross national happiness was really, really something new at the time, and even today. I mean, that's how they measure it. They have this wildly marvelous interrelationship with nature, and then it's they preserve their identity within between India, between the Tibet region of China, and even Nepal. So it's a remarkable place. I mean, the way they've managed their existence.
I love that. Yeah, it's a culture that I'm sure many people should really take a deep look into because there's a lot going on there in a really quiet country.
It is. It is.
Yeah. So now as we were actually bringing up a lot of this stuff, but coming into this question, if there's anything that anyone should know about South Asia, what should it be?
Well, I mean, this whole notion, the conventional wisdom is that these countries don't get along, and it's all that. But what amazes me is, once you rise above the politics, it's just it's just amazing that how common we are. I mean, how uh, our food, our culture, music, literature. We share that so much. Like, you talk about, Bengali literature, you'll probably have Bangladesh, India's West Bengal, and even
Mm-hmm.
Pakistan before the independent Bangladesh was
Yeah.
born. So you talk about Punjabi literature, it'll probably go to, Pakistan and Nepal, and because we have a sizable Punjabi presence there. They kind of were the pioneers of Nepali transport in Nepal, the Punjabi
Mm-hmm.
community. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
that, and then even talk about Sri Lanka because of the Buddhist and Hindu. I mean, the Tamils would probably will be more towards Hindu religion, and with Bangladesh, with I mean, Sri Lanka, the Buddhist Sinhalese would have this connection because of Nepal being the birthplace of Lord Buddha, in India being where the Buddha became Buddha, and then
Hmm.
parts of Pakistan and other parts that where Buddha traveled, and Buddhism kind of expanded to other parts of the world. So there's this kind of thread that goes through that's more deep rooted and more ancient than any of these modern political differences that generally dominate the headlines. And that's something that that's remarkable to me from someone from the region, and I think it would be as remarkable, if not more, to people outside coming there outside of the region.
Yeah, and I'm extremely glad that you brought this up. I mean, I think that all stems from the fact that before all these political conflicts, this was all like one country, and with the close geographical proximity, they all were able to exchange culture. Like, for example, Sri Lanka gaining Buddhism that started in India, Nepal, and so on. And I really would like to emphasize that even though South Asia is super diverse, there are also many ways that the region is united. I mean, for example, Bollywood movies, like whether you're from Sri Lanka or from Pakistan, I'm sure you're going to probably know who Bollywood actor Shah Rukh Khan is. And
Everybody
all the
does.
diets are very
Yeah.
similar and so on.
No, that's something great, and you have a lot of well, let's just say we have a couple of Nepali actresses who were big in Bollywood. Even today, you have Pakistani singers who are active, very popular there.
Yeah, like Rahat Fateh Ali Khan, and
Yeah,
you have Sri Lankan actress Jacqueline Fernandez in Bollywood. It's
yes.
just everyone's mixing in.
So there's that it's almost as if there's this relationship that moves in parallel. At the political level there's one kind, there are dynamics that probably are different, but at the public level, people's level, even food, reading, uh, uh, sports kind of brings it together.
Oh,
Cricket.
especially cricket. I'm
Yes,
sure,
that
especially
kind of
cricket.
is something really, really great. Nepal is a very recent entrant into this, and then, but still, we have Nepali players playing for Indian.
Oh yeah, no, and
So
they're developing very well. I mean, there's this
exactly,
one Nepali bowler who's like dominating right now. So, I mean,
exactly,
cricket's one thing that unites us all as well. So,
it does. I
things like
mean,
that.
yeah, and then we have uh, these shared legacy from the past that probably actually more than unites us more than divides us. They kind of brings us to this kind of understanding. You say something, and then you uh, people say from who have migrated from families that have migrated from India to Pakistan, or the other side, and then Bangladesh the same way, Nepal's open border, and then the influence in northern Sri Lanka, Bhutan, of course, Maldives, despite being a little removed in the
Yeah.
ocean, but I mean, still, as part of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, we have this organization there. It's done great in terms of cultural exchanges. I mean, not many political cooperation going on, but in terms of culture, tourism, trade, I mean, really, really slow but really steady kind of integration of cultures and countries.
Yeah, and I'm really glad we had this conversation because I'm sure when a lot of people think of South Asia, they think, okay, India and Pakistan, warring countries, and you think of all of that. But in general, it's just they're actually really similar.
No, I mean, it's just so amazing. I can tell you another story. I would talk to, Pakistanis in Kashmir, basically. So Kashmir is supposed to be the disputed
Yeah.
territory there. And we would talk about, as a Nepali, I would be probably, seen as a little bit neutral. So both sides would open up to me. And then, but as I went, deeper into the nuances of the place, the parts in India, the part in Pakistan, and then this Pakistani friend kind of comes up and tells me these stories from the Ramayana, and I say, man, how you're a Muslim country, and how do you know these Ramayan stories, so well? And he said, you know what? We used to catch, Indian Doordarshan from, from the Indian side of Kashmir, and we used to watch it. So he knew every story
Wow.
about the Ramayan, and that was something that really really impressed me. And then we got back to the heated political disputes again, but then it's kind of interlaced. So you go eat, and then the food's the same. You wear stuff, clothes, the food, everything's the same. You sing the same ghazals, music.
Yeah,
It's just amazing.
it is. It is. And now we should come to my favorite question in this interview, or should I say every interview. What are some of your favorite South Asian dishes?
Oh gosh, there's every place has its own. I'll start with the Nepal's momo
Exactly. Yeah.
dumplings. I mean, South Indian idli sambar, dosa.
Oh.
North
Mm-hmm.
India, Pakistan, Mughlai dishes. I mean, all the whole lineup. East Indian, Bangladeshi fish. I mean, it's just that greatness of variety and
Oh, of course. Yeah.
cuisine. And of course, the common thread. I mean, the rice, dal, roti, vegetables. I mean, a common thread. We all have that common. You gather at a cafeteria, in a South Asian cafeteria, and I mean, it's just like we're all there together.
Yeah. And okay, Mr. Upadhya, I have had all those dishes, and I can absolutely affirm to everything you've just said that they are delicious. However, I'm going to ask you one question, and there's only one correct answer. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Do you like biryani?
Oh, that's like, I mean, which one? I mean, I've just had so many
Oh,
different
too many to
versions.
list. There's like Malabar,
Yeah, I mean,
Hyderabadi,
I've,
too many.
yeah, I mean, it's just great.
I mean, no matter what biryani, just the mix of those
Yes, I mean,
flavors and
that's like,
rice and curry, chicken,
it's everything.
whatever meat, it's so much variety.
It is. I mean, it's the closest anybody can get into. Like in the early days when Indian food, Nepali food was not available even in the West. That was the savior. You see an Indian restaurant, you just jump because there's been 5 days. Yeah, you haven't had rice properly, so you want food from back home, and then man, you just go in there and then you grab your share of biryanis.
Yeah, and of course, and no matter what anyone tells me, biryani will always be my favorite
Oh,
food.
it's
Biryani and I mean, I'm sure you're non-veg, so I mean, there's like chili chicken, chicken
Oh no,
65. I mean,
yeah, I
they're
mean it's
quite
like everything.
westernized, but
Yeah, it's just
yeah,
amazing. I mean, it's just like the richness of it, and then it just brings everything together. I mean, the whole region culture together. I mean, it's just amazing.
and not to mention, I mean, South Asian food can be pretty spicy. I mean, I've had quite a few of my American friends come over and try my mom's biryani or my mom's chicken curry, and god dang, they
Oh,
they really had to get a lot of water. I
I
mean,
mean,
it was
spicy
too
is
hot for them.
really, really spicy. I mean, you really have to have that tongue for that. I mean, it's just great.
Yeah. hmm Now, as we go on more about culture, I mean, what are some of the festivals you celebrate?
Well, Nepal being predominantly Hindu, we have the Dasara, Diwali, of course. And then we have, very, very um, we have like a small but, very close knit Muslim and Christian minority. So, of course, Eid, the two Eids,
hmm
Christmas, they are celebrated both as, religious and cultural events. And then, so it's basically the entire lineup of Buddha Purnima, and then you have the
hmm
Harvest Festival. You know, maybe they're called different. Some places they're called Baisakhi, depending on the calendar we use. Like the Vikram calendar would probably in places would have parts of India, Sri Lanka, and Nepal would probably have them falling on the same day. Others would be even the smaller ones would be Raksha Bandhan. I mean, not lesser known ones. So we have
hmm
all those festivals that they're very very common there.
Yeah, very common. And as we talk, and I see like a lot of common elements again between India and Nepal. And I have to ask you, so as a Nepali, when you celebrate these Hindu festivals like Diwali, do you have different traditions in comparison to how they're celebrated in India?
Well, yes. I mean, a lot of times, it's just like even let's say, you know, Nepal would probably have a little more of the old tradition, the original tradition that was the pre-Hindu, which would probably see more like sacrifices, animal sacrifices, which probably wouldn't be that pronounced in India. I mean, from what I hear from my Indian friends. And then even in terms of vegetarianism, like Nepalese are not necessarily vegetarian, but those who are, they would avoid, even fish and eggs, which I assume or understand that a lot of my Indian friends, vegetarian friends, would eat. So it's some of these local differences would probably be surprising at the beginning, but otherwise, the same gods, goddesses, or the same
Mm-hmm.
cultures, the same, you know, uh, we have the mandir's bells, and then we have the call to prayer from the, uh, mosques, and then we
Of
have,
course, yeah.
so it's all like, they're all kind of mixed there. Of course, depending on which part of Nepal you are in, some are more heavily intermixed, some are not. But still, I mean, everybody is like, it comes from a common everyday experience.
Mm-hmm. And I love this question because it kind of just demonstrates the religious and cultural syncretism and blending of how similar but different ethnic groups are.
Yes, I mean it's just like if you even I was just counting, the number of dialects, and considering the size of Nepal. I mean, I was just going through this list where they had 127 dialects of Nepali. I mean, it's
Oh
just like
wow,
so diverse.
127.
Yeah, it's so diverse. I mean, every
Wow.
small community, even people of 100 people, maybe less than 100, would have their own language. But then Nepali would kind of be the common denominator there. Hindi is spoken, Urdu is spoken, and English, of course. So it's this, it's amazing to see all the diversity that is exists. But then there's like we're all have this. We're Nepalis, we're Indians, we're Pakistanis, we're Bangladeshis. But then again, we're South Asians in that sense. It's just amazing.
Yeah, we're all one basically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And now coming to this one, so you just talked about dialect, so this kind of is a perfect transition. What languages do you know from South Asia, and how different is each one in comparison to the other?
Well, I can tell you, like, basically, we're all from the Sanskrit uh, root, but
Mm-hmm.
given our different uh, experiences historically, Nepal being a monarchy, we had these court traditions of Arabic and Farsi, which is heavily uh, dependent on, are heavily influencing Nepali. But that way it puts us uh, a little bit closer to Urdu, and Hindi. Of course, we would Hindi would be completely comprehensible. Uh, and the other Indian languages, I would say Bengali, I can understand, but not write because of the script. Um,
Yeah,
the other
and
language,
South Indian languages are, I'm sure, completely different.
yeah, and then again, I developed this ear just by in Dubai with my friends, and
Oh yeah,
when they were conversing, and I would just try to pick up the words and the Sanskrit elements and kind of make sense. But basically, it would be Hindi, Urdu, Nepali, of course, and a couple of Nepali regional languages that have a connection across the border in India.
of
Bhojpuri,
course.
Awadhi, Maithili, these languages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can completely understand that. I mean, as a Malayali myself, which is a language spoken all the way down south in India, when I'm trying to watch Bollywood movies which speak Hindi, I still need subtitles because they just sound completely different.
No, it is because even for us, the Hindi, well, it's changed these days. But not traditionally when you speak of the Hindi movies made in Bombay, that you would have this Bombay slant of Hindi, which you would have to know either by watching a lot of Hindi movies or know the language. Uh, these slangs and everything, but it's a learning experience. And then uh, you watch the other Hindi movies that are, say, more arty type artistic movies, and then you have these polished Urdu language words, and then you go and try to consult your dictionary, and then what your trilingual dictionary there in English, Sanskrit, sometimes even four times. Yeah, so I had that at home, and but it was fun. I mean, basically.
Yeah, it definitely is. And so coming to your background, I mean, you now live in the US in Florida, and I'm sure you can easily distinguish between the Western cultures and cultures in South Asia. So what is the biggest difference you can see between these two cultures?
Well, like what I feel is there's this a certain the basically it goes down to the place of the family in South Asia, which I find is a little bit uh, retains its original quote unquote status. So
Mm-hmm.
the cultures and festivals kind of bring you together, whether you like your relatives or not. I mean, it's just like something to do, and then respect for the elderly. But things are changing there too. I mean, people. The satellite television in the early 90s, and then even now, I mean, people just, we can converse about the same TV programs here, same cultural shows there. Uh,
Of course, with like Netflix and all these universal kind of
yeah, they
broadcasting
just come
channels.
in there, which probably when I was growing up in Nepal, I'd probably would have to either very limited access to Hollywood movies, maybe
Mm-hmm.
radio broadcasts, Voice of America, BBC, rarely any television, and then read. The only magazines you'd probably get was Time and Newsweek, the Asian edition. But now, I mean, everybody, it's closer. But culturally, as a parent of two children here, and uh, trying to see the intermingling of these Eastern and Western cultures, I think it's the place of the family where here there's a lot of independence, and which the family does encourage. The parents do encourage after a certain age, whereas we, kind kind of hold on to our children, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Yeah.
too have a certain inside they know that, oh, my family's there for me, but then they're here with their independence with their peers, and then I think it's that. And even but there's this understanding and this coexistence that it's amazing that how South Asians have been able to navigate it these days. I mean, it's not at all what it used to be. The difference, especially with the availability of food, availability of everything. Indian movie channels to subscribe on, basic regular cable, or uh, just the Indian stores or the Pakistani stores, or whatever. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's that difference has just gone away now. Now I don't have to, probably even saying my name would probably be, oh, Sanjay. Like in the 1990s when I was here, I would have to spell it out. Now it's Sanjay, and everybody, especially at the hospitals, everybody knows it from Sanjay Gupta. So, oh yeah, Sanjay, Sanjay. I don't have to
Oh
spell it out.
yeah, I
Yeah. So
mean,
at
just
least,
yeah, and like the interconnected world we live in,
yeah,
it's I mean, the mass immigration of all these South Asians, it's
exactly. And
become like a name like Sanjay is pretty
pretty
common now.
common, and that I could really see from the early 1990s when I was at NYU, and these days, I mean, it's just amazing.
And I completely agree with that. I mean, something I've noticed in comparison to like non-Western cultures, when like in like for example South Asia, you have these family ties that are super important, and they live in collectivist societies where family is basically everything. While I guess in Western cultures, people are a lot more
Yes,
independent.
yes. There are
Hmm.
institutional reasons for that. Ours is more like family oriented government. Okay, we have that government there, but a lot of things the family is expected to do, especially collective guilds like religious guilds. People of a common ancestry or a common lineage will gather together, and they're expected to help each other out. Um, so it's just like we're more family oriented that way. And here it's independent. You have institutions and you have agencies that are very supportive of maintaining that independence. So I think there's a lot of context to that as well.
Completely agree. And now our final question of this amazing interview. If someone wanted to travel anywhere in South Asia, what advice or tips would you give them?
I mean, the most important one is always pay attention to what you eat and drink. I mean, it's not that, uh, it's just that even for someone living there or going out for me, it's always a problem for depending on what food I have. The first 2 days will probably, then the third day, fourth day, you have your stomach growling, and soon you have a fever, and then doctors may not be easily available. So it's always to pay attention to yourself that way. Um, you know, English is generally spoken, understood. People are helpful.
Hmm.
They may, the demeanor and uh, temperament sometimes might not seem like they are helpful, but they are, believe me. Um,
I'm
yeah,
sure,
and
yeah.
then so you ask for help, whether you need directions, you need doctors, you get lost, and even a little bit of mindfulness on, the food you get. Like if there's something you want to feel like you want to avoid, you don't want to be adventurous and try, just avoid it at least until you're familiar with what you're getting into. And then like I said, reading up a little in advance would be extremely helpful. Lots of guidebooks, I mean, all kinds, are available. And just knowing the place, uh, and what do's and where to go, what to eat, at what level, and for each of these countries, it's just like there's so much available to uh, understand the place and people, that I think it's it's uh, it's a learning experience which everybody will differ in their experience.
Hmm. And I honestly find it so funny that you bring up like making sure that you are being sanitary, is and because there are these street side shops that fill up the roads and almost everywhere in South Asia, and they're so tempting, whether it is like the pani puri stations or the dosa carts. But they're I must say they're also very delicious. However, I wouldn't describe them as like the most sanitary, I mean, you're out on the road, there's quite a lot of germs out there, and I'm sure you can attest to how delicious they are, but you do have to make sure that you're very careful about what you're eating and whether it's actually safe or
Yes,
not.
and then the drinking water. One thing that's always baffled me is, the very next person. If water kind of troubles me, I'll have like five people who can stomach it. I mean, I don't know what it is, how it affects people differently, but it's just like some people are just very good at absorbing and digesting, taking that water in, whereas others are like they have a tough time. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but so the best idea would be to pay, like, real attention to the water.
Hmm. And yeah, I can completely agree with that. I mean, as someone who's traveled to India every other year, and when I was younger, I would always get those stomach bugs. So just making sure that you pay attention to what you eat and drink is super important when you're traveling to quite a foreign region.
Yes, yes, that's true. And otherwise, I mean, because of this growing interaction, I mean, it's it's amazing once plan ahead a bit. Sometimes like you don't know what events. Sometimes there might be strikes, power outages, or yeah,
Oh,
or flight
of course.
cancellations. These are tend to be pretty regular compared to here. But but again, a little planning, would help a lot.
Yeah, and especially with all the, first of all, you have like many, I mean, I guess each state or each sub-region has their own major city that has a lot of places to visit. And you might also want to read up on
Yes,
that to
yes,
make sure that, okay, I have this perfect day that I can visit this and this and this. And you get to really experience what truly is the South Asian
exactly.
culture. Yeah. And I think with that, I think we shall conclude this interview. I really appreciate you being here, Sanjay. And it was a very engaging interview, and I loved the insight.
Thank you for having me. I really, really enjoyed it a lot.
So did I. And I hope you have a good night and Happy New
Happy
Year.
New Year to you too.
So, hopefully, you guys enjoyed our talk with Sanjay, and be sure to check out his latest book releasing in early 2021. I'd like to conclude our segment with a quote, and this one from Shada Savage. Travel expands the mind and fills the gap. Or in Hindi, यात्रा मन का विस्तार करती है और अंतर को बढ़ती है.